classes at the end of the week. Nobody else is excited, just me?
I am. I'm sure yet how it's gonna be, but it's gonna be.
Yeah, just have fun with it. Okay, so just as a reminder, if you recall the classic books on yoga, you have the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutra, and the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. So the Vedas, you can think of them really as the encyclopedia back in the day, or the internet back in the day. It just contained all of the information possible, and they put it in these books. There were 4 Vedas actually. So some of them contained rituals, some of them contained like all of their knowledge about astronomy and plants and everything. The word Veda itself means knowledge. Like Ayurveda, which is the, you've got traditional Chinese medicine, you've got traditional Indian medicine, which is Ayurveda. Ayur means life, and Veda means knowledge. So it's the knowledge of life is Ayurveda. It's a very beautiful name. So the Vedas are there, and the numbers that you see there, the dates are a rough estimate, because big debates in archaeology and stuff, and also they tend to get dated back more previous than really is, or maybe not early enough. Just depends on which archaeological reasoning you follow. So anyway, these are just rough estimates, but we know that the Vedas were probably the oldest anyway, if you're looking at these 5 classics. And it doesn't mean that yoga didn't exist before then, or that this knowledge didn't exist before then. Just means that it wasn't put in writing. It was just the first time that it was put in writing. So there was just a brief mention of yoga here, and not even yoga as a whole practice. It just basically said, seers of the vast illumined seer, they yogically control their mind and their intelligence. So it's like saying, in some yogic way, these wise people control their mind and intelligence. Okay, so that was all that was written. Then when you get to the Upanishads, it was a little bit more fleshed out. It was like the sages, the wise people, the sages own journey, like they did, like you do journaling. So they did their journaling as well, and those are their journals. Again, it's not one book; it's a compendium of books. When they tried to compile all of this class of books where people talked about their experiences of how to reach God, they reached about 108. So 108 seems to be this, there were 108 Upanishads. So it's said like this is also like a sacred number. Some people do 108 sun salutations. I don't know if that's like somebody just made that up, or that's an actual traditional thing. But I do know that in the Mala beads there are 108 Mala beads because of the 108 Upanishads. And then if you're really into numerology, 108 is 1 plus 8 is 9, and 9 is sacred number. It's the number of Jesus Christ as well, etc., etc. So Upanishads mean come sit close and kneel close to me. It's because when the teacher comes and says kneel close to me, the teacher is about to say something very secret and very intimate, like not out like this, but come, let me whisper something to you. Upanishad, come and sit beside me, and I shall whisper something to you. It's roughly what Upanishads mean. Then you've got the Bhagavad Gita, which, like we said before, is a small book that is part of this bigger legend called the Mahabharata. And it talks about the whole history of humanity and all of the gods and the wars that were happening, etc., etc. And if you're interested in like alternative theories, you should look into Eric von Daniken, who believes that the Vimanas and the gods mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita were actually aliens. And he's got like a whole theory on it, and it's really interesting. Sorry, not the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata. Eric von Daniken. From the Netherlands. I think, yeah, Eric von Daniken.
Sounds like, yeah. Sounds like a Dutch guy.
Sounds like a Dutch guy. Okay, so the Bhagavad Gita is a small part of that big Mahabharata, and here it starts in the middle of the story, and the story is that there is this general. His name is Arjuna, and you know, in India you have the caste system. You're born into your caste, which means this is your job for life. So he's born in the warrior caste, and he's a warrior. Some people are born in the Brahmin caste, and they're in the priests, and some people are in the merchant class, and they're the merchants. You can't cross. You can't go like, well, I actually feel like I want to be a priest. No, you're in the merchant class. You know, you stay there. So he was born in this warrior class, and so that's his job, and he's the general. And it was the eve of the battle. But he realizes that something happened in his life, that actually his birth family is not his real family. He was adopted or something like that, and his real family is the one that he's going to be fighting. So he's torn. He doesn't want to do this fighting. And what's the point in war anyway, right? So he has an existential dilemma. So he goes to Krishna, the god. But when he gets there, the general of the enemy was there first. And Krishna says, well, I can't say no to people who come to me, but he was here first, so first come, first served. And then, so he says to the enemy of Arjuna, do you want my army or do you want my advice? And of course he says, I want your army. And then so Arjuna was left with his advice, but Arjuna said, that's fine, because I'm here for advice. I don't want your army. And the whole book is just about Krishna advising Arjuna about life, and it's very, very beautiful. It has if you read the Bhagavad Gita, it has a very different flavor to the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali. It's very devotional, very soulful kind of book. You know, devote yourself to me, the God, and you know, very nice, very devotional. And all of the chapters are called, you know, like the yoga of devotion, the yoga of wisdom. So it's a book on yoga without ever mentioning a yoga pose, you know, but it's about life and how to live. Some say that's like the Bible of every like Hindu family. You've got the Bhagavad Gita there. So it's got a different flavor from the Yoga Sutra. The Yoga Sutra was written by Patanjali, and Patanjali is more of a philosopher. So he starts off by saying, you know, and now we practice yoga. You know, chapter 1, verse 1. Chapter 2, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the cessation of all the thoughts in your mind. Or yoga is when your mind stops turning. Yoga is when your mind stops turning. You know, and then he starts to explain, otherwise your mind is doing this or doing that, or it's in memory, it's this. So he really explores what this mind is doing. He even explores like the seeds that stay in your mind, how to burn those seeds. And then chapter 2, he goes into more practical stuff, the practice of yoga. He mentions really practical stuff, like if you're thinking negative thoughts, think positive thoughts. You know, like, and then, or like, do this mantra, or think about something light. So he does, and then there's also the famous yamas, niyamas, the eightfold yoga, that he mentions that in the second chapter. But sometimes I like to downplay those 8 things of the 8 limbs of yoga, because oftentimes in other trainings that's the only thing they study. It's as if Patanjali didn't say anything else, but that was like one part of the one chapter, and his whole book is incredible, right? So chapter 2 is about the practice, you know, how to practice, and it's the Raja Yoga. He talks about Raja Yoga. He talks about meditation. The whole Ashtanga Yoga system of the 8 limbs is really a progression towards samadhi, towards that state of like blissfulness, or the state of yoga with the cessation of thoughts. So you start with the yamas. How am I with others? You know, ethics. And then he goes to niyamas. How am I with myself? What practices do I have with myself? And then yama, niyama, then asana, which is the seat. It does not yet mean posture in this case during Patanjali's time, but it means how do I sit down, or where is the place that I sit. sit down. Pranayama, so the control of the energy through the breath. And then pratyahara, the withdrawal of the thoughts from the outside world and bringing everything in, discovering the inside world. Pratyahara, and then the dharana, dhyana, and samadhi are like all geared towards the mind. The dharana is the concentration, which is, as we mentioned before, like at first it's like, I really have to like concentrate. So it's that sort of concentration where you're actively disciplining and training your mind. The dhyana is more like, my mind is at ease and I can rest in this meditation. And then comes the samadhi, which is that blissfulness of yoga. So then his third chapter is all about the siddhis, more like the special powers attained through the practices of yoga. Because it's logical, in the West we often think of things like miracles. It's a miracle because it's impossible. Like, how can he walk on water? How can this happen? How can that happen? How can he levitate? It's a miracle. Or just like, it's a miracle or it's not true because we can't prove it through science, But in the East, it's like, it's logical. It's logical. You do your pranayama enough that your channels are so clear and you're light, so you levitate. Simple. It's like they've got this own different type of logic, or like being psychic. It's logical. You're practicing meditation, your mind is clear, you can get messages. Simple, so it's nothing strange for the Eastern mind. So he lists things like that in the third chapter. And then in the fourth chapter, he goes back to like absorption, absorption with the object of meditation again. So a lot of his book mostly is really meditation. So where are the yoga postures? Well, when you get to Swami Swatmarama, who we think was born around the 11th to the 15th century, he writes now the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and also around this time many other books were written. And here is the tradition of the yoga teachers writing down, you do this pose, it's good for this. You do this pose, it has this effect. So, and then you eat this and you eat that, and so. Now there's more of a manual for this physical type of yoga. But still, if you look at the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, most of the poses are seated. I think there's 15 poses there. Here we go. 15 postures from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Most of these are seated. Swastikasana, Gomukhasana, Virasana, Kurmasana is lying down like the turtle. Kukutasana is seated, but you're pushing yourself up with your arms. Uttana Kurmasana, I believe that's some sort of forward fold as well. Dhanurasana is the one where you're lying down on your belly, you're holding onto your feet and you lift up the bow. Matsyendrasana is the seated twist. Paschimottanasana is the forward fold. Mayurasana is the peacock, the one where you're like, I can't do it properly, but like that, and then you lift your legs. Obviously, you have to hold it. Shavasana, we know. Siddhasana is a seated pose. Padmasana. Simhasana is the lion. So it's from seated. And Bhadrasana, which is also a Baddha Konasana, which is also seated. Okay, so those are all the postures in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. And then it also, but it's like a guidebook because it also mentions other things. It talks about the channels of the body, the nadis. It talks a little bit about pranayama as well. And the cleansing practices as well. Because in Hatha Yoga, the cleansing practices called the kriyas, we'll maybe talk about that in a little while. The kriyas are very important, cleansing the body physically. Because imagine 15th century, everything around you is kind of dirty, or you live in the forest. Maybe, just maybe, if everything was kept clean, if I keep myself clean, there'll be less bacteria, I'll be healthier, right? So they did a lot of cleansing techniques. Actually, maybe let's do that now. So, this is your ancient yogi, very kind of, do we say cliche, or very typical ancient yogi who lives apart from society, and they are sadhus. They're like saints and mendicants. They walk around. They don't have a specific abode, and their whole life is just dedicated to this to this practice, right? And then so like in yoga history, what is really fascinating is how did that become this? The modern yogi, the surfboard.
She has much better posture.
She looks healthier, actually. At least she eats. Okay, so what is yoga? Of course, like Yoga Alliance will say, well, hard to define. We're not going to try. They have a very big job, They have to uphold yoga standards, but at the same time, it's like, how can you uphold standards of yoga when there's so many different yogas? I mean, you did kirtan last night, and there are people who just do kirtan and they are yogis. How do you subsume that under an umbrella and have standards for it? So they have a difficult job. So they respect all different lineages and all different styles. That's all that they're saying here. But just going back historically and looking at old texts, we can see different definitions of yoga. For example, in the Katha Upanishad, this firm holding back of the senses is what is known as yoga. So pratyahara is yoga, the holding back of the senses. Then one should become watchful, for yoga comes and goes. So sometimes you're there and sometimes you're not, because you're distracted or you're doing other things. Maitrayana Upanishad. This is the rule for achieving it. Concentration of the mind on the object of meditation. Restraint of breath, which is pranayama. Restraint of senses, which is pratyahara. Meditation, which is dhyana. Fixed attention, which is dharana. Investigation, which is probably svadhyaya. This is one of the yamas of Patanjali, the svadhyaya, the awareness of the self or investigation. Absorption is samadhi. So before Patanjali came up with his eight components of yoga, there was this, and it was 6. And what is different is it didn't have yamas and niyamas. It had this, which is one of the investigation, which is one of the niyamas. And the explanation that some people theorize is that, well, because back in the day, it was still the golden age, and you didn't need to remind people how to be good. And then you started the Kali Yuga, which is starting of the degeneration of people, and people are forgetting how to become spiritual, and how to be good. So Patanjali had to remind us, yamas and niyamas. But before that, it was the 6-limbed yoga, which is that restraint of breath, restraint of senses, meditation, fixed attention, investigation, absorption. These are called the 6-fold yoga, 6-limbed yoga. And of course, the most famous one, the Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga, Chitta is mind, Vritti turning, Nirodha stopping. When the mind stops turning, it is yoga. That's a reminder of your Patanjali's 8. So the entire world is only the fabrication of thought. Play of mind is only created by thought. By transcending the mind, which is composed of constructed thought, definitely peace will be attained. This was in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. And I think this could be the most philosophical part of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, because it's all it's just a really practical handbook, the Pradipika. But this one struck me because it was very philosophical. And I am often asked, what is the link between yoga and Buddhism? And it's this. You know, this whole sentence, which is in the Yoga Pradipika, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, sums up the entire mind-only school of Buddhism. The entire world is only the fabrication of thought. Maya, the illusion. Watch, what's it called? Watch The Matrix.
Yeah.
The first one, The Matrix. I was looking through YouTube last night and there was a video, the title was, The Matrix was a documentary. But I didn't see the whole video. It's like, it's true. Play of mind is only created by thought. By transcending the mind, which is composed of constructed thought, definitely peace will be attained. You know, the other day we were doing a practice on limiting beliefs. Remember that? We were on the couch downstairs in the reception room. And I'm always reminded of like Neo in that movie, and then he's fighting with that other guy, Morpheus, and then he gets hit, and then he goes, and Morpheus is like, "Do you think that's air you're breathing?" He's like, and then his limiting beliefs went away. It's like, wow, just that déclic we say in French, that realization. You think that's air you're breathing? I had this conversation with somebody, and we were talking about awakening and illusion, and it's I can't remember the word that he used. It wasn't that we were using. It wasn't illusion. It was some other word. It's like conditioning. It's like your mind is conditioned or like programmed to think a certain way, right? And then, we were talking about the different conditionings, like, okay, you're conditioned to be jealous if this happens, or if that happens, you react this way, it's conditioning. And then he said, well, being human is just conditioning. And I was just like, boom, wow, I'm an alien.
Have you heard of this experiment they've done on fleas?
Yes.
About conditioning. So they put fleas under like a cup or bowl. So the fleas were only able to jump as high.
Yes, and it's a clear cloche.
Yes. And then they removed it, but the flies still
jumped the same height.
And then the fleas had like reproduced, so they had the next generation.
They all
only jumped only
that
as
high.
And then the whole generation renewed. So the original that experienced that cup, they were not there.
Yeah.
But the new ones still only jumped as high.
Interesting. We are all but fleas. Yeah, you just need somebody to say, hey, jump higher. What? No, it's like, also joking apart, it's like if you look at the history of the marathon, the first, like, they couldn't do it. And then the first guy who did it, he was like really struggling. He was gonna die at the end, And then after that, just because one person did it, it broke the limiting beliefs. So like now, so then another person did it, and then a faster time, and now or people in costumes are just running along and then crossing finish lines in marathons. And it's the same thing actually if you look at different sports, athletics. It's not just that we're healthier and we've got more training, but it's also something has opened up in the mind that's like, yeah, I can actually do this. So they've opened up the floodgates, we say. Okay, the Sveshtasvatara Upanishad says, let yoga be practiced within a cave, protected from the high wind, or in a place which is level, pure, and free from pebbles, gravel, fire, undisturbed.